Well, welcome. The election is almost upon us. We're down to the last couple weeks of local and national election. So we thought we'd have our our less than liberal brethren come in.
Oh.
You can see Uncle Ed's.
No, I'm liberal about some things.
Yeah, and I'm thin, young, and have hair.
Okay.
Yeah, both
Have a magic mirror?
There you go, exactly. So tonight we want to go over the view from the conservative side of this national election, because it is unique, and the local election. So why don't we start with introductions?
Ed Bertarelli, Chairman of the Milford Republican Town Committee.
Chris Moore, member of the FinCom.
Bob Burns, Hopedale Selectman, Water and Sewer Commissioner, and member of the Hopedale Republican Town Committee.
Do you ever get home?
Yeah.
At
Occasionally.
I was going to say,
I'm retired.
yes.
I'm home all the time.
Yeah.
Okay, Ed.
Well-
2 weeks to go.
Well, as we're filming tonight, people will, I think, see this in reference. Shortly after we're done filming, the third and final presidential debate will happen. But aside from that, we've been on, done 6 shows or whatever, on the roller coaster, crazy developments in each party, the unpredicted, the predicted, whatever. The last time we spoke, we were 1 day or 2 days short of segueing into our candidate for Republican rep in the district. As you know, the lateness of John Fernandez deciding not to run limited our options on the ballot.
Seriously.
Yes, seriously. And so what we had to do was, in a way, ensure the place on the ballot would be secure,
Right.
so that we wouldn't have a nuisance candidate or
But I mean, Ed,
yeah.
I don't want anybody thinking that you settled. You had 3 months to pick the
Well,
candidate.
that's right. But we had to go back to the scenes. I think we had recruited a top-notch candidate who decided, because of the shortness of the time, we were behind the 8 ball basically, that family concerns, and that's the thing that trumps everything. You always, no one ever goes into a thing and says, well, we want you to run no matter what. It's your wife, your children, your family pets, your whatever.
Well, you
how
heard
you
Kurt
feel.
Schilling say, I've made up my mind I want to run for Senate.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
let me talk to my wife, because I've got to see how it's going to affect.
Yes.
And I respect that.
Yeah. And also
His family and his kids.
Yeah. So and also your job. So anyway, as it worked out, we had given up our placeholder on the ballot, gave us time to go out and recruit a candidate or candidates or whatever, and we did. So the candidate who once we had the primary and the primary was secure, Sandra Slattery Biagetti, originally from Milford, not formerly a select woman, Hopedale, got the nomination. The executive committee, the state committee of the party recommended her, and she's been out relentlessly doing doors. I think she's probably at 4,000 right now. She's had help with door knockers and herself, and her reaction has been amazing.
But now, when you say from Hopedale,
Yes,
I mean, the Slatterys,
yes,
they're Luby Ave people.
that's right.
I
And
mean, Karen Slattery, her sister,
Yes.
graduated Milford High in my
Yes,
class.
that's right.
They were
And-
from Luby Ave.
And there, as we say, and Bob will verify this, the 3 selectmen in Hopedale right now all have Milford roots. So there's a lot of interplay of Mendon, Hopedale, less in Medway, but it's a dynamic when people understand the towns. There's a lot of mixing up of people, a lot of Milford people in Mendon and Hopedale and vice versa and so on. So there's a
Well,
dynamic
I mean,
mix.
you think about it. When we grew up, you had the Hopedale band concerts.
Yeah,
So the Heights, Luby Ave,
yeah,
rivals, till the great uniter, Water Street. As soon as you went over the hill,
yeah.
all of a sudden, we were from you turn your hat, we're from
Yeah.
Milford, and if any of the Hopedale kids picked on a Luby Ave kid, oh, no, you're picking on Milford.
yeah.
It's the same way. If you
Yeah.
think about it, if you go out of our little area, Hopedale, Milford becomes the same.
Yep.
If you went to Boston, somebody picked on a Hopedale kid, you'd defend them because it's a
Eh,
cousin.
Well, maybe.
Oh, stop.
But-
Most people would. You wouldn't.
But in the and I'm glad you brought up one aspect of, so, an employee of a local insurance company for decades, very well known in the community, a a large family and a huge group of friends, and from humble beginnings. As you mentioned, Luby Avenue. Her father, when Luby Avenue originally set up, it was a veterans project. And when I went to school in the neighborhood, we had roughly 20 kids Luby Avenue had just been built, and it was housing for veterans. After the Second World War, the times were real tough. Drapers, GM, whatever.
Sure.
You may be we'll be working 2 or 3 days a week. There are all sorts of issues. So Sandy comes from a great background, and she's uniquely qualified to talk about certain things like welfare and whatever, because she and her family got support at a certain age, and she's very concerned about welfare reform to make sure that the welfare benefits are not going to people who don't deserve them, and that the benefits are really benefits that benefit people. I think she'll be a great asset to support Charlie Baker and try and get him up to a veto-proof majority, because obviously the governor can veto a lot of things, but with the legislature, overwhelmingly Democrat, a lot of it's over what do you call it? And I think with a little shout out to former Rep. Fernandez, I think she's also a more bipartisan, potentially bipartisan person than the Democrat who's going to run for the seat. And I say that in that Mr. Murray's made a remark last night that Sandy was part of this Republican foot soldier, that the outside interests outside the district were basically funding her and stimulating her to run. And if Sandy's actually as Milford could be, I mean, from humble beginnings to a great job to having a wonderful family, and that's a uniquely Milford story, as we know.
But that's one of the things, you keep hearing that the shortness that people had forced the Republican Party or the independent, whatever, to pick somebody. Well, in my mind, Ed, if you didn't pick anybody, you would have been a candidate, because you know that when the actual selection process happens, you'll decline.
Yep.
But
Well,
you had months
But it's interesting.
to pick the right candidate
Yes, but it's
for you.
interesting. Let's put the hat on the other way. And as someone said, you can really only say this once, so I'll say it once, is that move of the sudden retirement also sort of eliminated a lot of Democrats from running for the seat, potential Democrats, if there were potential Democrats.
Sure.
So it went both ways, I think. So we're in the middle of a vigorous campaign. As I say, our candidate is going door to door. I think she's doing the Citizens
Is
for
it
Milford
vigorous?
Forum.
I mean, I haven't heard much.
Well, the mailings will be going out shortly, but I think her philosophy is beginning is go and meet the voters. You can spend a lot of money on ads, but if someone's knocking on your door, and she's finding an interesting thing is that with Hillary Clinton on the ballot, a lot of women, both positively and negatively, are zeroing in on that, and they also zero in on the fact that a woman is knocking on the door asking for their vote for state rep. So she's getting a very, very positive reaction. As I say, she's working every day, weekends, at all sorts of events. She was at the Heights reunion, as you know. So we'll see what happens. But I think we're going to give it a good shot and spend what we can and spend the money we have to do it and try and see if we can get some support for Charlie Baker in Boston, because I think we'll get into this a little bit later. But I think the Democrats are already talking about some plans they have for
Let's
future.
talk about budget.
Yeah.
But okay, so we've got what, 6? How many Republicans at Beacon Hill?
Well, probably in this Republican foot soldier army, to quote people, there are 200 reps. We have about 200 representatives and senators, 160 and 40. We have about a total of 40.
Right.
So 1/4 of the body.
And I think it's interesting. We haven't talked about a state representative race in this town in a long time. When you think about with John in his long tenure, and then with Marie before him, it's been a long time before there's been an actual battle, Democrat against Republican, for that seat.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean it was
when-
always Democrat against Democrat.
For a primary, exactly. But
For
when
the
you talk
primary.
about parties, we haven't had a Democrat against a Republican in a long time. And the last one I can think of is when Selectman Kincaid ran against Representative Parenti. I think that's the last time there's been a ticket
How
in
about
which.
when Bob Burns ran against
Oh,
John Fernandez?
Yep,
That's right.
Yep, that's right. Yep.
Now, I keep feeling when I moved back to Massachusetts that I was the 12th Republican
Well,
that registered, and now all of a sudden it feels like there's a banana shape. You know, the Blackstone Valley.
It's
Am I
Worcester
wrong?
County generally.
Oh, Worcester County.
Yeah,
It seems
southern
to.
Worcester County, and it's
Yeah.
extending down into Rentham. But before we move
Yeah.
away from Sandra Biagetti, I'm probably the person that knows her the best, having served on the Board of Selectmen with her, having lived in the town of Hopedale and watched the way she handled herself on the school committee. Well, when she became a member of the school committee, she actually took her own time to go up to the superintendent's office and work with the superintendent's accountant to learn everything there is about the school committee's budget, to know what everything stood for, what columns was the busing in with the curriculum in, and what benefits were here and there. She put herself into it, heart and soul, to get to understand where the money went in the school, so that when she was at the school committee meetings, she could make an informed decision about the money they were spending and if she thought that was the appropriate place to spend it. When she got on the Board of Selectmen, every Thursday evening, we used to we signed the warrants on Thursday. Every Wednesday evening, she used to go into the town hall, and she used to get the warrants. Some of them were 4 inches thick, and she would sit there and go by page, make sure everybody's timesheet was signed, make sure that everything was approved, signed by supervisors, and if she saw something she didn't understand, like why did this person pay this garage so much money, she would check, she would make a note of it, she would check on the next day. She found a lot of things that she found a few things that shouldn't have been paid out of this pocket, should have come out of this pocket. And then other things she found that were fine, but she understood them better. There was no one that understood the warrants better than her. There was no one that understood the school budget better than she did. When you get Sandra Biagetti as a state representative, you're going to get a woman in there who's going to learn about the state budget. She's going to know where the money goes. She's going to know where the money comes from. She's going to know what was wasteful spending and what is not wasteful spending. But what she does with that information remains to be seen. You know, those are her decisions that she'll make at the time. But she's going to learn it and know it and do it.
Let me ask you a question. People have brought up, they're worried. There is 160 Democrats and 40 Republicans. Will a Republican representative have a harder time bringing programs and, let's face it, pork back to Milford?
No, I'll tell you why. Because of the limited number of the 40 Republicans and the 160 Democrats means that the Republicans get appointed to more committees because they need Republicans and Democrats on the committees. So as a Republican, she may get appointed to 9 or 10 committees, whereas a Democrat may only get appointed to 2 or 3. So she's going to be on some significant committees, and that will give her the opportunity to steer funds our way. And I'll tell you something else about her. She's not the type of person to go into Boston and sit there and say, oh, I'll grab all this for Hopedale, or I'll grab all this for Milford. She's the type of person that will go into Boston and look at all the money and say, you know what, Medway could use that, Mendon could use that, Hopedale could use that, and Milford could use that, and I'm gonna hit every one of them. And that's the type of person she is. She's fair. She looks at problems across the board. She doesn't play favorites, even if you're one of her favorites. It doesn't matter. When it comes time to looking at where things are going to go, how things are going to be handed out, who's going to have preference over what other department, she's fair and across the board. Has had to say no many times to people in our town.
Another worry people have, because I don't think as many people know Lubiav roots or the Slattery family roots, you know, they say, okay, we've got a known Milford candidate going up against a Hopedale candidate.
Which is, again, if you don't know Milford, you would say a known Hopedale candidate. But if you know Milford, and there's a number of our voters are, Sandy's mother plays bocce at the Italian Vets in the Bocce League, so it's very clear to a whole group of people that they're a Milford family. So there's an interchange, I think. These aren't, you know, Milford has a suburban touch to it, but it's still the great bulk of people, you know, are acclimated in the community and, you know, and grow their roots here. As I said that about Selectman Kincaid. His parents moved here many years ago, and his brother and sister and himself are vital parts of the community. It's a tribute to the community. People want to stay here and help the town and you know, make it grow.
You know, that's an interesting point, because I joke with my daughter,
Yep.
saying that she's now, my Alexis is now finally a true Milfordian. Third generation Milford, and she lives within 2 miles of her
Yes.
mother.
Well,
But you know, you joke, but
Yeah.
you really look at it, how many people do live very close to the Morans? I mean, there's a few generations of Morans
Yes.
kicking
Yeah,
around
yeah, yeah,
Milford.
Yep. Oh, no, there's no
Yeah.
question.
And then there's the people who have, in a certain period of time, had to leave Milford, leave Massachusetts because of the economy. I mean, the economy picked up in the last few decades, but there were years where, you know, your chance of advancement was Washington or somewhere. And, you know, as I say, we've had directors of NASA, we've had, you know, world-famous doctors, we've had all sorts of things. But to go back to the Republican versus Democrat, one of the advantages I think a Republican has is that being a smaller group, they're not beholden to the leadership. And any Democratic rep will tell you, including our own, that there are certain votes that the leadership requests that they make.
That's why you have whips.
That's the point. And that's why you have committee chairmanships and you have offices that are okay and not so okay. There's a discipline involved, and there are certain ways that are done to make sure the public doesn't know about certain votes that happen. They're bundled together. Being a Republican sort of gives you options to get in there and get up on the floor and say what you're going to say, because basically, you know, everyone knows where you stand or whatever, and there's issues there. So, you know, as I say, I'm encouraged. You know, she's waging a vigorous campaign, and we'll see. But the district has changed a lot. I mean,
Yeah,
you know,
that's a point that I think
Yeah.
cannot be stressed enough. Is if you look at a map and you see that the area and how it's gone red, and it's just amazing. I mean, our current representative is one of the only representatives in the area with a D next to their name.
Yeah.
I mean, and you even saw it, you know, with Senator Fatman in the election against Senator Moore, and you're seeing that the leanings of this part of the state are certainly going toward the conservative
Those
Republican.
are the declared ones. I mean, you know, when I came back,
yeah.
because, you know, you talk about leaving. Yes, I'm a Milford kid. First thing I wanted to do when I grew up is run away.
Yes, like
right?
we all
And
did. Yes.
I love Washington. I loved Paris. But then when the family thing comes
Yeah.
in, the gravitational pull says, I want to go back
Yep.
to my roots, things I value.
Yeah. But what
Now, you turn around and say,
what were you saying about the?
to go into
Yeah.
the primary, I mean, the Marie John primary,
Yeah.
come on, at the end of the day, that dictated who our state rep was going to be.
Absolutely.
If you were sitting there as a Green or a Republican, you didn't get to play. So I wonder, the unenrolled, if they're not a much bigger force than we give credit for. You know, we look at Democrat, Republican stated.
A great part of the unenrolled voter is a Republican-leaning voter, much higher percentage. And I found, amazingly, in talking to people and getting nomination papers or whatever, I get, I'm definitely an unenrolled or whatever. And then you come back and the paper, the town clerk's check, and it says, you're a Democrat. Well, huh? I'm a Democrat, because a lot of people don't know because they don't go to primaries. I think the reason a lot of people choose unenrolled is they can go in and vote in either primary.
Yeah.
So if an unenrolled voter really likes Charlie Baker and wants to go in and vote for Charlie Baker, fine. In the presidential primary we had here, There were a lot of people who came in the primary and voted for Trump who run enroll voters. So it gives you the leeway, and you don't have to change your registration afterward. You remain
Right, you
unenrolled.
just stay unenrolled,
So
doesn't matter.
it gives you the leeway to pick and choose the primary you want
Ed,
to.
present company excluded, I would have a hard time trying to determine the difference between a conservative Democrat in Massachusetts and a liberal Republican.
Absolutely, there's no question.
Ed, I can always figure out. There's
Massachusetts.
no question.
Actually, I would say on that, not a conservative Republican, but the fact is there are very few. I'm glad you brought that up, because the legislature used to be composed of a large group of conservative Democrats. They're largely gone. Okay, they're out of the state Senate. They're certainly out of the legislature. A conservative Democrat, Marie, was replaced by a more liberal Democrat, John Fernandez, and it's gone that way through the whole state. The same way, there are some probably what you would say liberal Republicans, but it's the same as the national. The parties have tended to
Yeah, but
sort
Ed,
of.
when I look at the square states,
Okay, but
they're
yeah.
deep red. They are what I consider very conservative,
Yeah, but they
very
that's,
Republican.
That is it. But there are states like Kansas and Iowa or whatever where the party's very diverse. It isn't. The party's a mixture of people. The Kansas Republican Party, which I know somewhat of, has very moderate liberal roots and conservative, and they get along. It's just the makings of the state.
But when I look at Massachusetts,
Well-
I feel a lot more comfortable that, yeah, you probably have 20% far left, 20% far right, but the vast majority are people who really vote on issues and people.
I think,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I couldn't agree with you more. I really feel it is that way. And as time goes on, and you see the way that the parties are really becoming very divisive, and it's disenfranchising a lot of people. And to me, that's only getting worse. And when you see rhetoric like we're seeing on a national level, it's causing people to say, I'm going to be unenrolled because, you know what, I don't even want to be affiliated with that. And it's turning a lot of people off. So a lot of people are going toward the middle. I mean, so I totally agree with you.
See,
But
there's
yeah.
questions like, well, you're going to vote for this person because she's a woman. And, wait a minute, I find that intellectually insulting. I wouldn't not vote for somebody because she's a woman, but I wouldn't vote for somebody
Well, that's
because she's a woman,
Well,
yeah.
or a man, or a Portuguese, or a Catholic, or any other little
well, yeah, but
slice.
But that comes with time. But to go back to the reps race, one thing that concerned me was, as we film this, we're facing about a $400 million budget deficit. Now, curiously, Charlie Baker vetoed how much?
How is that surprising?
No, but how much did
Was
Charlie
that
Baker veto?
360, 380?
Okay, all overridden.
Yep.
So now we're faced with a $400 million deficit. One of the unions came forward and said, you've cut to the bone. Okay, next. And now we're hearing rumbles in Boston. Well, maybe it's
Don't
time.
use that
No,
profanity.
well, maybe it's about time
Yep.
people listen to reality when
Sure.
they just assume what goes on here. Remember, Governor Cellucci and Well cut taxes like 43 times, and people just assumed that was going to be the way. Baker hasn't even touched the tax system. Deval tried to
But
tinker with
there's
it, but let me
profanity.
go back to what they're going to say, is maybe it's time to consider tax increase in the
There's
rates.
the profanity.
There it
Well, now my question is, it seems to me, it's pretty clear where a newly elected Republican rep would stand on tax increases with the governor, because the governor is totally against tax increases. It remains to be seen where a Democratic rep might stand when the leadership says to him, by the way, this vote is important
But
to
Ed,
us.
here's where I'm stuck.
Well,
Baker gets up and says, here's how I'm going to balance the budget. 300, I don't know what the exact number was.
was high
360,
threes.
380,
Yeah.
gets overridden.
yes.
And a couple months later, it's a surprise that we're almost 400
Well,
million in the hole.
But look
Well,
at the
who's,
look.
who's
look
surprised?
Yeah.
Well, but that's my point. Bob.
They feign surprise.
Right.
well,
they
first
say,
of all, did Boston
"Whoa."
Globe surprised? No.
Yeah.
Okay, come
How
on.
could- wait a minute. When the guy says, I'm going to spend $100, and then you say, yeah, no, you're going to spend 110.
Yep.
And then you come back and say, well, wait a minute, I'm $10 overdrawn. How can that be surprising? I mean, Baker came out and said, if you want a balanced budget, this is it. So if you cut or you veto
Yep.
my spending cuts,
That's-
then you got to make it up somewhere.
That's
that-
why
there's
state
no
government.
question.
That's why state government would be better if it were more balanced. And to say the governor has enormous powers, yeah, he's coexisting with the Speaker and the President of the Senate, who really run their chambers. those single people. Is the fact is, if we did have a veto-proof majority, in other words, we had these antics would never even occur. And that's why I say again, you know, I appeal
Then
to
you wouldn't be living in a single-party state.
well, yes,
Yeah.
but again, the point is, here's a candidate who is going out and knocking on doors, trying to make sure the tax increases and things like that don't happen. And that's, I mean, that's an honest approach, I think. And it's also an approach that she's using her shoe leather and her time and her energy to go out and talk to the voters. So I think, you know, given that we may even have the specter of them even talking about a tax increase, what politicians always do is they test the water. Sure. So, and you know the Boston Globe jumped on board right away. Of course. Yep. How much? What do you need? Yep. Whatever. They'll test it again. They'll test it again. Then they'll throw something at Baker. You know, they'll do whatever. They might use the national political scene to do it. But there's always a pressure there from these forces to expand the budget. As you know,
So-
every time they've had a fee,
Yep.
every time they put a fee in for any kind of thing, they diverted the money. They
Well,
diverted the money to
now,
other
now
uses.
when you look at the at this race, okay, you have a Republican and a Democrat running. All right, if the Republican gets voted in, the Democrats are going to go, whoa. If the Democrat gets voted in, the Democrats are going to slap high five. Now we get the tax increase.
You think so?
It's
You
a
think it's-
referendum.
Of course
Well,
it is.
It's a signal. And
It-
there
it's
are,
a
there are,
Signal I'll buy. A referendum I have.
well,
No,
yeah, but the
it-
signal is, hey, Al, when you're out pounding your feet are sore at the end of the day, it's a referendum in a way too. I mean, and that includes a Democrat or Republican. When you put your name on the line, that takes a lot of courage.
It does.
That's the way I look
You
at
know,
it.
you look
I
back
did it.
at
It could be
Dick Moore.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, the old joke was when Fernandes showed up at Beacon Hill and they said, well, how does it feel to be a conservative on Beacon Hill? And he said,
yeah.
Conservative? Does that make Dick Moore a Republican?
Yeah. Well,
You know, I mean, Dick was not far left in my mind.
but he had changed though too, and the district knew that. So that was the point.
You know, you got a guy who was,
But again, that's the past. We're talking the present.
but again,
Yeah.
you look today and you say,
Yeah.
the label doesn't affect me, Democrat, Republican. I'm looking at the person.
Well, the stands on issues, and I'll give you another one, which just occurred to me. The Democratic candidate has said that immigration, illegal immigration, was a federal issue, not a state issue. Now, that's a classic Barack Obama statement. It's a classic,
But wait a minute, Barack Obama's federal.
well, of course, but the thing is, it's what they call the pass-off. So in other words, the local officials blame the feds, feds blame the local officials. Technically speaking, illegal immigration or undocumented immigration, or whatever you want to phrase it, is not a state issue except when the buck stops at the cities and towns, and
we
in
have
the
to
welfare
support it.
system, and in the hospital. So
That's right.
to say that, for a candidate to say that it's not a state issue is wishful thinking, because the impact in welfare, in Medicare, in mass health, in the school systems is phenomenal. Now, whatever we think of it, it is a state issue because the failure of the feds to do their job has brought it
It's
down.
a local issue. Look at
Well,
last year.
what's a state? That's what we mean by
I mean,
a local
it's
issue.
a town issue. We had to come up
That's
with
right.
$500,000.
Oh, yeah.
Well, okay, so if it's
To
not
take care of
so
the
is-
Texas kids.
Yeah,
Is the,
exactly.
is the
But-
question coming up then, if it's not a state issue, does he feel it's a local issue? Apparently not, but it's both. And you know, on the front lines in the finance committee, it is a local issue.
But why should the towns when children come to school, they should be taught in English. They should be mainstreamed in English, just like the Italian kids were when they came
Italians,
over
the
here.
Portuguese.
Portuguese.
Right down the line.
Right down the line. When your parents came over here, when they went to school, when my grandparents came here to Milford schools, when they went to school, they were all taught in English.
Yeah.
You know, they spoke Italian at home, but they
and
were
Bobby,
taught in English at
that's
school.
My biggest issue is
Why is this done, though?
if you keep a kid, and I'll be personal, in Portuguese, and they're taught in Portuguese, they're maintained in Portuguese.
may not be.
You're really doing a disservice to them, because when they come out to the real world,
They don't assimilate.
if they can't interview with me in English, I'm not going to hire them.
But why is this happening? Isn't this because there's an ESL lobby within the state and within immigrant groups and within the Democratic Party, within the teachers union, that's basically saying, is this beneficial to the kids? Because what hits me in the face is the success stories of the most recently the Portuguese immigrants, the Italian immigrants in Milford. The success stories are done exactly as you said, immersion and a mixing in the society. Isn't that the case?
But Ed, when you think
And
about
we-
the goal
Why-
of ESL ought to be, my cousin, when he came here from
Yeah.
Portugal, spoke no English. They put him in 4 grades, and he had to work his way up.
But
And it was, hold on, it was
Yeah.
difficult. I thought the goal of an ESL program was to accelerate the immersion of the child, to help the child learn
Wow.
English better and assimilate better faster.
Why did it work so well when
Yeah.
when our grandparents
Success is
came
staring
over?
us in the face.
You know what? My
Because
when
they
my
didn't have a choice.
my grandparents, but it worked so well.
I mean, to use an exact opposite, places like Mendon, where they do Spanish immersion in kindergarten, first grade, in which they speak nothing but Spanish all day long. Those kids are completely fluent after only a year and a
Yeah, but
half.
that's-
But my point is, when it works both ways, if they can learn Spanish that quickly when all you're doing is teaching in Spanish, why, if you take a Spanish person and put them in English and only speak English, why can they not pick it up in a year and a half as well?
Because if you think about it, when I left my home, 88 Water Street, I walked out of my house and these kids were speaking a funny language.
Yes.
Because my family, everybody we associated with only spoke Portuguese. I had to learn English. The Spanish immersion works because when the kids go home, they're immersed in English.
Yeah.
But
So they're getting both.
keep-
That's what I
but-
mean.
But isn't really what the ESL program about to keep the ESL program going? And that's what so many of our programs are done
Have
with the
become.
federal government. It's no need to say, because the end is nowhere in sight, and these are jobs for people, and it bothers me. Now, you know that, I mean, the Americanization or whatever occurs despite ESL. But, so I think,
But
this
see,
is...
that to me, Ed, I would rate the teachers of ESL
Yeah, but-
higher on how quickly they work themselves out of a job.
But let's get back into politics, because this is sort of, it is politics, but as I say, we've got to acknowledge, and I think Sandy's acknowledged that, immigration, illegal immigration is both a federal, a state, and a local issue. And if you don't know that, then these guys here on the finance committee, when they write the checks, and as we know in
Well,
the
we
community,
feel it.
Yeah, exactly. We all
Now,
feel it. Not
next
tax rate.
question.
Yep.
How do you rate somebody, I mean, let's face it, we've got a newcomer to politics versus somebody who's been there.
Well, who's the newcomer?
Who's the newcomer?
No, she's not a newcomer.
Okay.
That's
She's been on it.
again myths.
But
been
again,
honest.
Yeah.
there's the myth. What I'm saying is
Well,
people are saying, okay, you got
Well, I
a
don't-
brand newcomer,
Yeah.
but wait a minute, she's been on selectmen, she's been on a lot of committees.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
school committee, sure.
What do you tell people?
Well,
You tell them that they're both the same. Politically, they're equal.
yeah.
They both had experiences on both. You're on the school committee for 10 years. You're on the school committee for 3 terms instead of 8 terms.
Yeah, this is saying.
That's why I'm bringing it up, Bob.
Yeah.
At some point, it becomes moot.
I think
The
yeah.
difference you have here is the difference you have a lawyer, and you have an individual that is willing to go out there and tell it like it is, and call them like she sees them, and learn as much as she can about the issues at hand.
But
That's the difference.
Why can't a lawyer do that? I mean, see, I'll draw a line saying, wait a minute. If you're saying you have 2 candidates, one that's this, one that's that, I'll buy it.
Well-
But
Do we need another lawyer in the legislature?
Yeah, gee.
Answer that question
Yeah,
for me.
yes,
Do we-
yes or no?
Do we need another lawyer?
Without
Just
committing yourself on the election.
Come on.
Maybe? Yeah.
I guess to me, the background,
do we need another lawyer?
Well, the other point is,
do we need another independent citizen?
Well,
To
yes,
me, it's
that was
more-
the idea of, that was supposed to be.
That
is
was
the Milford Finance Committee independent citizens coming
Right.
to help govern it? It isn't lawyers or
Are you an
financial
accountant?
advisors, is it? We'd be up the creek if we had lawyers or finance. We have diverse group of citizens who volunteer their time to make sure Milford's finances are well run. This is what we're talking about, I think.
How about the school committee? The school committee, are they all teachers?
Of course not, thank goodness.
Are they all trained educators? You know, how about the finance committee? You're not all accountants. You know, I mean, what?
But see, to me, I guess the point I'm trying to make is I wouldn't say that's a plus. I'm not sure it's a
Well-
minus either.
Well,
I think the individual,
the point is that...
you know, if you want to argue,
It was meant to be a joke.
oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I
then
thought
missed
you'd
it.
laugh.
Yeah.
Then I missed it.
The other point is unfortunately, with the number of lawyers in the legislature, a lot of the laws are written with lawyers in mind.
Yeah.
So we see these laws that are piled on one another that basically provoke more business for the lawyer class. So that's an interesting analogy, because when you have, are all lawyers alike? No, but there's a certain point of view that comes with that. And the point is you have probably a clear, good high percentage of people in both branches of the legislature have a legal background. And that's, again, I guess I'd like to see a little more what you want to call diversity. And I guess the other thing is, when you talk about Sandy's life story, I think it's it's an interesting one. It's a very Milford one. You know, it's one that we all basically grew up with, or our parents grew up with, or whatever. But as I
And
say,
I
if
think
we want to...
the biggest thing, candidly, I'm looking at myths. Political novice, experienced politician. Then you
that's
sit there and say, wait a minute, no, they both, we may not see as much of Sandy, because we're in Milford, she's been working in Hopedale. A Hopedale person versus a Milford person, no, wait a minute.
And that's not true either.
They're two Milford roots. I mean, you go through it.
Yeah.
So to me, what comes down to is you listen to both of them.
That's right.
And you say, forget whether she's a woman, she's a lawyer, she's a this or that. Forget that he's this, that. Listen.
Their stands on
And
issues.
which one
right.
Yes.
do you feel most comfortable represents your belief?
Exactly.
And because I can't find any knockout criteria.
Well,
You know what I mean? In the past, we have had elections where, yeah, no. You know, just absolutely no. So it becomes easy. I can't find an absolute no. So now I've got to watch the debates, watch the roundtables, and say,
yeah.
which one do I feel most comfortable
and you also have
with?
to
you
look...
ha-
You have to look... Good, Bob.
You have to understand, though, that Brian has been trained and has done it many times, spoken in front of people he doesn't know, made presentations, and does it very eloquently. And Sandra's a person who deals one-on-one. So now when she gets in front of a crowd of people, she's not as eloquent as Brian is. You know,
Isn't that-
she may not be as
If I want to
easy.
That's
segue,
positive.
let's move to the national side. Isn't that the same thing that people are saying? You got one person running for president who doesn't have a smooth,
I
presentation.
wouldn't say that about Hillary.
No, but again, I think you have to look, to close on the other part, you have to look at, I feel, and as I say, I've biased in my point of view, but I feel electing a Republican gives them and us a certain amount of independence from the Boston leadership, because the leadership of the Democratic Party, runs both houses of the chamber, and get along and go along is the
But
rule.
Ed,
but-
I think what you're saying is what I just said.
Yes.
You have weighed both candidates,
Yeah.
and it's obvious you believe one candidate represents your views
Well-
more than the other.
And also that they'd be, that's true, but also that they'd be more open to input from the citizens than whatever.
But again, that's
Yeah.
your criteria.
That-
And
well,
what I'm
yeah, I think it's
asking
an important
people
one.
to do
I
is
think
to
it's an
say,
important one,
do
yeah.
the same thing. Watch them, listen to them, and decide which one
Yes.
best will represent
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Well, when
How
you
much
look,
time do we have, by the way?
Oh, we've got a few minutes, and we got to go national. So tell me what's going on here, because
Yeah.
I mean, I love that I just did the liberal view, and of course, Trump's the devil.
Well, but
Right.
I got a question. because I've been dying to ask this. Most of those people,
Why did everyone just take a deep breath for a second?
no.
Because when Ed says I've been dying to ask,
I seriously, all of us just
I'm
paused for a
concerned
quick
because
moment.
our last conservative show, we spent 10 or 15 minutes being pretty critical of Donald Trump.
yes.
Okay. My question would be for my liberal friends out there, is the ones who are on the show, is most of them were in the sack with Bernie Sanders.
They supported.
Yes,
Bernie
okay.
Sanders.
Yeah, they right. They were delegates. They were committed.
In the tank. I
In the
think they
tank.
call it.
Okay. Okay. Yes. All right. Okay. All right. I like that. Anyway, wherever they were with Bernie Sanders, and we now figure out that Bernie. I don't know how to phrase this politely, but he had no chance in hell
He got played.
running against the Democratic Party from the WikiLeaks thing that savaged him. It was going to go into remarks about his religion and everything else. And they know, as you know, what Hillary is. And now all of a sudden Donald Trump's the devil. So I guess what you do is you smooth over
But
your
isn't
guilt.
that deflection?
Well, no, I was going to say, I was just about to slip, but yes.
Isn't that? I mean,
Yes.
So he
I-
ends
I-
up
Well, I'm
with a-
confused. So
he ends up
I'll-
with a new house and supporting Hillary.
Yes. So
there's things happening that I'm just a slow old man. Why are so many people from the Hillary campaign getting amnesty if she didn't do anything wrong?
well, the other thing is, so
right? Why would I need it?
so Bernie emerged basically as the hope of young people to basically a sellout. And that's basically what he did when he supported Hillary. Now, I guess my concern is, it's apart from politics, is if you're a young person in political life, you may have backed some of the conservative Republican, you may have backed Bernie. You didn't back Hillary because she got a tiny percentage of young people. What are you going to think about it being involved in the process ever again after this fiasco?
I don't think
Because-
there's any question. I think the Democrats really hurt themselves with the way they played that out. I think the people in the future, it's one of those, and not
a
that the
future
Republicans
hurt.
haven't done plenty of bad things, but it's the future of what the Democratic Party did by the way that they handled that whole
Savages.
situation. You're going to have all those people coming out and doing the work that they did for Bernie and getting the support, and they're going to say, as to Ed's point, what did I do it for? What did I do it for? And let me tell you, that is going to burn them in the future. And they may not feel it now because they will vote for Hillary anyway, because they will definitely not vote for Trump, or they'll stay home.
Yep.
But in the future, come 4 years from now, come 8 years from now, those people are becoming disenfranchised and said, wow, I finally got excited about politics. I finally wanted to get involved. I threw my hat into the ring,
And
and
I
guess
got
what?
played.
They hit me right in the face with
And
my
I got
hat.
played.
Yes,
Even
exactly.
the word disenfranchised almost implies it's their fault.
Yeah.
No, it's basically,
No.
gee, I think I'm a pretty intelligent person. I work at a job. I feel
Yep.
And here's a 70-year-old and a 71-year-old running basically a campaign that is largely in a level of the gutter. There was a poll on, this is where some of these newscasters are amazing. They said, oh, it's an amazing number of people 70 and over are distressed and disgusted by the presidential race. Well, a lot of people over 70 have never heard such language like to describe people in their lives.
It's
Yeah.
embarrassing.
The one thing
Yeah.
nobody can question is Trump has run an amazing campaign because he's done it on no money. You look at how much money
Yeah.
Hillary raised, and
is
Trump
deployed, yes.
well, raised and spent.
Yeah.
Shows you that money in politics means nothing. They want to take big money out of politics. There's nobody that's thrown bigger money at a race than she has, and she's still clinging on to her supposed
Just shows you how
lead.
important message is.
But Bobby, isn't the biggest worry what Chris? I mean, it's profound what he's bringing up. You've got a guy in Utah drawing 20%,
No, he's tied. He's tied for the.
but it's just wait a minute.
And I'm in his group of people who see his emails.
But isn't it amazing
they're a
that he
three-way
can draw
tie.
that many?
Well, no. What the point is that the point is the
it's unique about
population
Utah.
of Utah is about
Well, that one is.
70% Mormon,
Yes.
and yes, people out there, they aren't devils. Okay, they're hardworking people and very
They're
wealthy
Americans.
people.
Next.
And they're pro a lot of things good Republicans are. But question is, they're repelled by her views and his actions. And so, and they're people who pretty much, look at very family-oriented people and go, do I want to hear my children, my children to have either one of these people as president? And as you say, the tea leaves seem to indicate that Hillary will get elected. The question is whether she's now branching out and trying to seize the House with Nancy Pelosi, and she's certainly diverting money to seize
What a
the Senate.
successful career she's had.
Well,
let's
again,
bring her back.
But remember, they understand power, and if no one understands this about Hillary, and I think if she's elected, Putin's going to find out the first time he meets her. He's going to go, whoa, he's been dealing with Obama all these years.
Sure. Yep.
When I went to
Yeah.
Moscow a couple years ago, I remember seeing one poster that summed it all. It showed Putin, no shirt, holding a puma.
Yeah.
Barack Obama holding looked like a poodle.
Yeah.
And you didn't even have to read Russian,
Yep.
That's right.
No, no
right?
question.
I mean, you could just look at the pictures. Somehow, I don't think he will view either Hillary or Trump holding a poodle.
No.
No.
No, it
So
certainly
let me
won't.
ask you this. So we have this presidential election that has been beyond an abortion. It is disgusting what this has turned into. You're a candidate that wants to run 4 years from now, 8 years from now, 12, in either party. What good person is going to raise their hand and say, you know what, that looked fun, let me do that?
Isn't that what
I
Schilling?
mean-
Isn't that the essence of what Schilling said?
Yeah.
I've made up my mind.
Yes.
But wait a minute, I got to have a serious
Well,
talk with my wife
So
and
what
kids.
husband or wife is ever going to say if you
Yeah.
came in and said,
Well, it's
you know what,
true.
honey, I'm going to run for president?
Yeah.
The heck you
Well,
are.
Yeah, Mother
Are
Morin's
you
going to look at
kidding
you and
me?
say, are you on narcotics?
Here we are.
It's
Here we are.
unbelievable. And it's
here
both
we are.
parties.
Yeah.
They're,
Yeah.
you know.
But here we are. We have, the allegations about Trump. We have the list of women that Clinton has bothered in many different ways.
Yeah, but
and
when-
you
when-
wonder, and you go.
You can't hold Bill Clinton's actions
I didn't say it was
against her.
I didn't say that.
But I can hold the fact that she attacked
Well,
the victims.
my
See,
question,
that's the part.
my question is, who's going to hold the Bible when she's sworn if she elected? Bill Clinton?
Okay. No, but you see what I'm saying? When
Well,
people say Bill Clinton, I mean, let's face it. Any company, from yours, family owned, to mine, if a senior person, man or woman,
Yep.
did what Bill Clinton did,
Yes.
there's no question.
But he's never worked in public
Well, but
life.
I'm just saying, that
in private
you're not going to
industry.
have a
He never-
debate. You are fired, you are gone.
Al, they never
But you
they never
can't-
owned a home till they moved to
You
the
can't
mansion or the
hold
White House.
that against
Yeah,
her.
flat broke.
But when she attacked the victims,
Yes, well, that's
now I sit there and say, now wait a minute. That, I do think she has a responsibility. Don't call this young girl a Looney Tune,
Yeah.
because it's a young kid. Whether it's a boy or girl, I don't really care. Right? This is a junior person.
you're in a
Not the
subordinate.
senior.
Exactly.
And
But
just
did
the
you
whole
s-
campaign's inciting of everything. You're reading about them getting supporters to provoke people.
Well,
for
I mean,
violence.
we
The-
thought Trump was on his nutty case
Yep.
when he said they're hiring people to come in.
Exactly.
And now
Right.
it's piece
And
to
that's
the case.
exactly
and it's
what they-
absolutely
And we
been
thought
proven
he
true.
And they
was-
got away with it.
And we thought he was being a nut when he said they're trying to rig the election.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And now here comes more WikiLeaks stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
They had a
Let's
seven,
get- let's get it-
they,
yeah.
they had a 70-year-old woman on oxygen who went up to this 72-year-old man and pulled on his shirt like this. And when he turned around, she fell on the ground and yelled that he hit her. And he was a Trump supporter and she was a Hillary
The question,
supporter.
the thing is, when also Trump, I guess this is the understatement or whatever, he tends to overstate certain things. But the fact is that the rigged election, we learn more and more from WikiLeaks is that the most powerful media outlets in the country have a private relationship with the Clinton campaign. And so the editor of the Boston Globe,
I mean, I got a hard time when you're sending your text to the editor to edit.
Yeah.
well, but the point is, this is
To the
this is-
candidate.
This,
I
is,
mean,
the,
right,
this is the
reverse,
New
right.
York Times, the paper of record in their own mind. Is so when you have what I said many shows
When they're
ago.
sending it to the campaign to say, hey, smooth this out.
You remember we said the show the other before the quote to the Democratic candidate is what's your favorite color, and whatever, and you asked the Republican when you stop beating your pet. So you brought up something about the Clintons about Hillary a long time ago, or the Clintons generally, and I think it's shown through this whole thing, is that they've never felt that the rules that people live their lives by apply
and I've
to
said
them.
Hillary, Milhouse, Clinton, because just like Richard Milhouse, in my mind, she believes she's above the law.
Well, Nixon dreamed of a time when he could have the FBI, the CIA, the IRS, all at his beck and call,
And this is here.
say, you know what? I want you to go after Ed Bertarelli. I want you to audit him. I want you to check him out, find out what
Now
he's
that
doing.
happens.
And now Hillary Clinton has him. You see, the head of the FBI gets up there and says, oh yeah, she had Hillary Clinton. I had one server at my house in Chappaqua, the head of the FBI. She had multiple servers, but it was just a
But
mistake.
Bobby, you know the problem I have?
It was a
There was a
mistake.
congressional directive, a subpoena sent,
Yeah.
saying, don't do this.
and
they
she
don't-
deleted the
And then
email.
they did it.
Right.
But they know they have backup in the Justice
What was their
Department or
punishment?
whatever.
But amnesty.
Exactly.
But see, that's the part that I have a hard time with
why-
because
why-
I don't need amnesty from doing drugs. But I don't do
But
drugs.
Al, they don't. They really don't care if you're upset with it because their rules and the federal employees, the people that they are involved with, don't care because they're not caught. And if they know they've got the director of the FBI who's going to basically get up and embarrass himself,
Has he done more damage to the FBI in people's mind than anybody you
Of
can think
course.
of?
Yes.
The people, the FBI agents are all furious
There's no question.
at the way
and if he
this
thinks
was
he's going to
handled.
survive his term, do we have any time to do the ballot questions? Or are we?
No, we're okay.
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
You want to go through?
Yeah, we've got some interesting ballots. Do you want to do those, or do you want to stay with the Feds?
No,
Yeah, no, that's
let's
fine.
go.
Yeah. Well, let's see.
Charter schools?
Well, the first one, I think the one that's interesting is that the sleeper is going to be the humane treatment of animals, which may, the free-range animals, that may pass.
You think so?
It may pass, and we may have $4 eggs and
Yeah.
$45 a pound veal.
Oh no.
I'm thinking
Does that mean I'm
just
gonna
the way
have
it's
chickens
worded.
running around my house?
Yes.
Yeah.
The next one is the slot parlor, which I don't know, that didn't pass in Revere, so that's really not important. But the two big kahunas are the charter school and then the legalization of
Marijuana.
and I'm not sure if that's the right language. The legalization of recreational
Recreational,
use, is that
right.
it? Yeah. So
But take charter schools.
Okay.
Because you've got a whole group saying charter schools suck money away from traditional schools.
yes,
And then the opposite, you've got a whole group saying charter schools add money
Yes.
and opportunity to education.
and there's a little truth there because if you look at the ad, the state is supposed to now this again one of these classic things of the state makes promises. The state is supposed to reimburse the towns.
Yeah, Milford gets 47%
Okay.
of the net school spending type number to us.
But I meant for each person going to a charter school.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And right now, the state only funds that amount at around 63, 64%. But that's the state's choice. It's supposed to be funded at 90 to 100%. But I'll tell you, from knowing people in the inner cities in Boston, there are a number of, when charter schools first came out, you know, the teachers union was against the whole idea of them.
Sure.
Governor Weld and Governor Salucci and the legislature put them in with a cap, and then the cap was gradually raised. Well, one of the charges the teachers union said then was this racism. In other words, the privileged will flock to the charter schools, leaving the public schools in Boston and all the inner cities even more segregated. The exact opposite happened. The minority students flocked to the charter schools in Boston because, as I've talked to two mothers who I know work with a friend of mine, they were sick and tired of no discipline in the schools and in the Boston public schools. The fact that
Well, Ed, the conversations I've had
Yeah.
is people in the inner city believe their children will get a better education
Yep, more
at a
structured.
charter school.
Yes,
Whether
yes.
it's some want structure, some want to, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a whole myriad of reasons.
Yes.
At
But,
least they won't have a rubber room.
yeah.
but at the end
That's
of the
the
day,
room where all the teachers that go every day that don't teach anything but still
but you see,
collect the
I've
salary.
always had a problem
Yeah.
because I believe we should be paying our teachers absolute 100 grand plus a year.
Well, what? Yeah.
As long as you use the words at will.
Yep.
So just like industry, you want the best, you pay for the best, but the bottom 5% every year?
Yeah.
The Boston.
Hold on, before you say that,
go on.
okay? Does everybody at your company make the same money?
No,
Okay, who gets more, who gets?
the performers.
Who gets the, no, like a category. Who gets the most money at your
Management.
maybe the research, managers? Okay.
Managers, then key players like researchers. and-
Researchers,
yeah.
okay. See, we have a big problem with the public school system. Math teachers and science teachers should make more money
Sure.
than social studies and
They're harder
English
to come
and-
by.
That's right, and they should make more money because what happens is you get a kid that goes to college and he comes out with a social studies degree. What does he do with it? Or he comes out with an English degree.
Yeah, but Bobby, even if
Yeah.
you sat there and said your science and math, we're going to pay a premium for them
That's right.
because otherwise they
allowed.
go to
They're going to
industry.
industry and
Not
they're going to make
allowed.
more money.
But
Not
I want
allowed.
to see the top science teacher get more money
Well,
But
and the bottom ones
then you don't want
washed out.
unions in the
Well,
school.
No,
Well, that's
wait a minute.
yes.
Again,
Yeah.
pay
Didn't
for
you say that?
performance.
You
You
just
don't-
said no unions. You
I
can't.
don't like, look,
Yeah.
in my mind.
Yes
and
no.
Yes, because
Yes,
the
no
unions
yes.
today are set up to protect the underperformers.
No,
correct.
They have it in a lot of
When
places.
you look at it in the
So you-
20s,
so you
I would
don't-
argue the
Wasn't
other way.
for-
So
That's
you don't
exactly
want
right.
unions in the school.
Huh?
So you don't want unions.
I don't like unions in the school that
Okay, that's-
keep me from paying
okay.
the overperformers.
No, no, no.
wait a
That's-
minute.
So the problem
That
is-
I
means-
just wanted to hear
The
that.
unions won't allow you to pay a premium.
We're
Of
going to
course.
get you.
So-
We're going
No.
to pull together for a gift certificate here.
Yeah.
No, but at the end of the day, in the 20s, you think of the muckrakers, Upton Sinclair and
Yeah.
all, there was a fundamental need
But-
Yeah.
for the unions.
But Al,
What-
Today,
This is.
if I'm a top performer, I don't need
but
anybody to
Al,
protect me.
Al, let's go back a little.
We're
in
almost
history.
in the 20s again. You know?
Yeah, but let's go back to free public education. Horace Mann,
Yes.
Franklin, Boston. Also helped found Framingham State Normal School, the first teachers' college in the United States of America. Okay, so Boston was always, in Massachusetts, was always an innovator. It seems to me we're at the stage now where the teachers' union, this teaching industry, are hurting our barriers. We have to rethink the schools and rethink how they're working and maybe reinvent them
And
for
if
another
the
generation.
unions would evolve,
But I'm
then
not.
I'm happy.
I don't want to talk.
All I'm reading about is,
Yeah.
no,
Yes.
everybody gets the same. I got
right.
8 steps. If I live 4 years,
Steps and lanes.
well, those chutes and ladders drive me crazy
Well-
because there's no room there for the top performers
And that's-
to
yes,
get
that's
more.
exactly
You're
what-
in the same chute.
That's
same
exactly
ladder.
what we
That's
said
exactly.
about ESL. Why is ESL there? Because it's there. Okay. Whatever the outcomes are, we'd see.
Well, we could go on and on. It's going to be interesting because in 2 weeks, we'll all decide whether it be Hillary, whether it be Donald Trump, whether it be Brian Murray, whether it be Sandra Sari Biaghetti. All the speculation, all the questions will be answered when you come back in a few weeks for a post-election show. So thank you, and as always, unlike Uncle Eddie, I will never ask you to vote for a specific candidate, but I will always, like Uncle Eddie, beg you to vote. Because the most important thing is to get out, pick the candidate who you believe best will represent you, best represent your principles, and then get out and let your voice be heard and vote. So
Amen.
please don't stay home.
Yep.
That is the worst thing you can do in my mind, but I'm just one old man who wants to say good night, may God bless, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Not too long since I've been home. Been running all my life just searching for my soul.